What's up, everyone? Welcome to Mortgage Monday. I'm David Green. He's Christian Bachelor. This is Real Talk Real Estate. And we are getting into Trump's big, beautiful bill. This has been in the news for a while. There's been a lot of efforts to pass it. I believe it barely passed by a vote of 215 to 214. It is now moving over to the Senate, where it's expected to be revised slightly and then passed. And in today's episode, Christian and I are going to be talking about how this could affect the mortgage industry and how it's going to affect the real estate industry at large. Spoiler alert, I think it's probably going to have some positive effects on the economy, but we'll let you make up your mind for yourself what you think about it after today's show. Christian, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I feel like we've been talking about the big, beautiful bill for a while, and now it's finally coming to reality here. So we'll see how it impacts everything. Really, it's got a lot in it.
There's a lot that's been changing, from tariffs to big, beautiful bills to ceasefires and wars to potential new wars that could be starting. So this is definitely not a boring time to be an American, I can tell you that. Also, if you guys don't mind, please go to the comments and leave a comment for Christian telling him that you are appreciative that he's recording with me today. He is very sick and pulled himself out of bed and even did his hair just to be here for Mortgage Monday so that we wouldn't miss another week. So thank you for that, Christian.
Absolutely, yeah. It's what I think is COVID, but I feel like everybody calls every bout of just a regular cold COVID nowadays. But been a rough couple days, but we're getting through it.
Well, hopefully that continues. And in the end, we'll leave our contact information if you guys would like to get a hold of us about getting a mortgage for yourself. All right, so let's get into this thing. What is in the bill in the first place? Well, there's some big things to just get in at a high level here. The bill is shaping up to add roughly $3.8 trillion to the debt that we have in the country over the next decade. A lot of people were not very happy about that. They did not want to see the debt increase. They were hoping to see it decrease. It looks to me like this administration has taken the stance of, we can't stop inflation and we can't stop some of the things that were put into place as far as expenses that are growing. So instead, we're going to focus on creating revenue and lowering taxes. And as you guys see some of the stuff in the bill, I think you'll see why I took that perspective and why it looks to me like this administration is saying, hey, if defense is going to be tough because of all the money that we printed, let's put our attention into offense. And that's why I think they're adding to the bill here. There's also going to be changes to Medicaid, food stamps, and other services that would tally $1 trillion in reduced spending. The sprawling 1,000-plus page package carries Trump's title, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, as well as his campaign promises to extend the tax breaks approved during his first term while adding new ones. Second spoiler alert. If you were one of those people that was taking advantage of accelerated depreciation and bonus depreciation, it looks like you are going to be in a good position because that is something that was included in the bill, which will be good for real estate investors. Here's a look at some of the proposals included in the bill. Number one, tax cuts for individuals and businesses. Central to the Republican package is extending about $4.5 trillion in tax cuts that they engineered during Trump's first term in 2017, while temporarily adding new ones that he campaigned on during his 2024 campaign, which we'll hear about in a second here. This includes no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime pay, less taxes on car loan interest, and others. The bill increases the standard income tax deduction, bringing it to $32,000 for joint filers, and there is a temporary $500 increase in the child tax credit, which brings it to $2,500. Christian, as somebody who is approving people for loans, when you hear that there will no longer be taxes on overtime pay and on tips, as well as some car loan interest, how does that affect how much money somebody can get pre-approved for to buy a home?
Yeah, good question. It gets a little deep into the loan guidelines, but what it immediately makes me think is Las Vegas, Atlanta City, maybe Miami thrown in there, are going to probably see increases in real estate, in real estate values, because whenever you have a type of income that has historically been taxed, and now we're taking, it sounds like, potentially tips and overtime into the non-taxable territory. And it's sounding like there's going to be a limit of, what we were reading, 25,000 potentially, right, of non-taxed tips. It creates a very unique opportunity for those types of workers. That's casino workers, hosts at like a nightclub, waiters, the people who historically, get at least a significant portion of their checks via tips. construction workers that work overtime, nurses that work overtime. There's a lot of opportunity there. And the reason why that's important is whenever you have untaxed income in terms of mortgage qualifying, you actually qualify for more. And the reason being is that an easy way to understand this, right? All of the guidelines in lending. So you guys have probably heard, debt to income ratios, right? That's the biggest criteria in which determines what you qualify for. All of it is based on your gross income. Okay, so if you make $100,000 a year, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the rule setters of conventional lending, determine that usually around the loan product you can go to like between 40 and 50% of your gross income in terms of your debt. So if you make $100,000 a year, you can have up to $50,000 a year in debt. Now a lot of people say, "Oh, 50% of all my income, that's a lot," which is true, but that's because they assume, probably between a 20 and a 40% tax rate, and you need the rest to just live, right? And that 50% can just go towards all your debt, not just your home, all your debt. That's your cars, your student loans, your personal loans, credit cards, everything that you pay reoccurring every month. Now, when you have a percentage of that that is not taxed, there's more wiggle room there. So what conventional guidelines actually allow you to do, and there's not very many examples of this because non-taxable income is kind of rare. There's a lot of non-tax income for veterans, for Social Security. Some aspects right now have non-taxable income, but if tips and overtime join the fold, if you make $25,000 in tips, we're going to be able to gross that up now, which means for every dollar you make, we'll be able to give you like 125%. So we'll be able to give you $1.25 in qualifying potential. So you basically get 25% more borrowing potential on every dollar you make. What that means is people who get income via these now potentially non-taxable avenues are going to qualify for more, which means there's going to be an increase in interest in those areas, right? And the areas that are very known for taxes.
You're talking about the geographical areas?
Yeah, 100%. Right. And Vegas is the most obvious one that comes to my mind, because if you ever talk to, a blackjack dealer or a craps table dealer, I think like 70-80% of their income is usually tips, right?
Yep.
They get paid minimum wage basically on salary, and then they make a good amount on tips. Those people are going to have a much higher qualifying potential, knowing that we can give them more credit for every dollar they make that is non-taxable. So that's the only way that I really see this impacting the mortgage world outside of inflation, outside of, what the Fed may do to respond to this. If the Fed determines that this bill is inflationary, they could raise rates. So this is one of the things that David and I always talk about. If you're in regular communication and your goal is to whether refinance or buy in the near future, you should be in almost day-to-day contact with a mortgage broker. If that's us, awesome. If that's your bank, if that's whoever you trust, because this bill is absolutely going to have a response from the Fed, whether that's higher for longer and increase rates, or if it's, hey, this should have beneficial impacts to the economy and maybe we can bring them down. I think it's going to be the first option there, because Jerome Powell has historically referred to Trump's policies as inflationary, and we'll see if he holds that stance. And Trump has many times said he wants to fire Jerome Powell. So we'll see what they land on, but to be determined, right? We got some very interesting world economics that we're leading the way on right now. So we'll see how everything impacts it.
Now, this section that we jumped into right away, specifically the no overtime and no tips, probably will affect real estate investors and those getting a mortgage more than all the other sections we're going to talk about. So that's why we're spending more time here. In addition to, like Christian mentioned, being able to qualify for more and geographical areas that will probably benefit from this, which are going to be places that are known for tourism, because there's going to be tips that are associated with that. You also need to think about the overtime factor here. When I was a cop in 2015, I worked, I think, every day of the year but 3. I had 3 days off for the year, and most of those shifts were double time. So I was averaging about 95 hours a week on the clock, not including the driving. It's crazy. I was working all the time. I was sleeping in my car. My base pay, I think, was probably like $85,000, but I made over $300,000 that year because of the overtime. I got hammered on taxes. And when it was all said and done, I felt like a fool because I killed myself. I lost a year of my life. I gained a lot of weight. It was miserable. And then I paid so much in taxes. I was like, I should not have done it. That didn't make sense. But now that you aren't going to be taxed on your overtime, I mean, what's the math on that? That's like $240,000 or so that I would have not been taxed on. That's
Yeah.
insane. And I don't know if the bill has specifics of if they're going to cap it at a certain point, but there are professions that just were disproportionately benefited from this. Public service people, I'm guessing some utility workers probably work overtime. What are some other jobs that we're not thinking of, or I'm not thinking of, Christian, that work a lot of overtime?
I mean, I just know from my history, my mom's a registered nurse.
Yeah,
She's
hospitals.
got a lot of overtime, right? So hospital workers, a lot of school teachers that pick up shifts in the summer, right? They may stay late or do tutoring or whatever. And we see overtime on so many people's, even something down to like, a dental hygienist, right? I mean, if they stay late during the day and they're helping out their dentist or a doctor's assistant, or, I mean, really it could be anybody, right? Anybody who has the ability to work over those 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week. I mean, it's federally mandated you get overtime, right?
Yeah.
Um, Now, I do see that it sounds like the bill may potentially have caps, at least on the tip portion. I think we read up to $25,000 in tip income. I still have to do the research and see if that's the same thing for overtime, because David, in somebody your position, you'd only get $25,000 of that knocked off, right?
Right.
I would like that would be very interesting to see if the overtime is uncapped. And I think what Trump's trying to do there is motivate people to work overtime, which I don't think is a bad thing, right? I mean, if you're getting a bigger bang for your buck for every hour you work, just like David did, I mean, you guys can see with his numbers, he took an $80,000 salary and made multiple six figures. That's a game changer, right? Now, it's not as big of a game changer if you're losing 50% of it to taxes in California, right? If the federal portion of that goes away, I mean, you guys do the math. Yeah, like David was saying, 30 to 50% of $300,000 every year. I mean, that's you're keeping a significant
A lot
amount
of
of money in your
money.
pocket. Yeah.
So in addition to certain areas being able to qualify for more, certain professions are going to benefit. And that's going to do more than just help individuals, in a sense, qualify to get a mortgage, who I'm sure are very happy to hear this. It's also going to help real estate investors as a whole. Because if your tenants are people who rely on overtime, if you're renting to travel nurses, if you're renting to healthcare professionals, first responders, any of these jobs that have wages that are based on overtime a lot of the time, contractual based employment situations, your tenants are going to have more money and be less likely to fall behind on their rent. If you live in an area like in California, none of the police officers that worked in San Francisco lived in San Francisco. That is impossible. No one could do it. I imagine it's similar in places like San Diego, high expensive places to live. It's very, very difficult to afford to live where you work. So suburbs like Brentwood, where I lived, were known for where all of your first responders would live, and they'd commute an hour in to go work at a hospital or go work as a firefighter, be a deputy sheriff, whatever they did. Those communities are going to see an increase in the value of their homes because the people who live there are just going to become disproportionately wealthier. You're probably going to see now, I would imagine, a shift in the employment. You're going to have more people fighting to get those jobs, which this has nothing to do with economics, but that's good news that we have better people trying to be firefighters and police officers and EMT drivers. We're going to get rid of some of that apathy and sluggishness because now those departments can be pickier about who they bring on. So stuff like this will send ripple effects throughout the culture, not just the economy, although the economy is going to be affected as well. What about this car loan situation? So apparently, if I'm understanding this right, if you buy an American-made car, which is funny because the whole tariff on automobiles from somewhere else was something that made everyone angry. Cars are already expensive. Well, this bill says, well, hey, if you buy an American car like I wanted you to in the first place, we'll give you a $10,000 deduction on, was it the interest of the auto loan, I believe? Does that sound right?
Yeah, and guys, you'll have to forgive us. This bill was literally just announced yesterday as we're recording this, so we're still learning about it, and it may still be changed a little bit before it goes to Trump's desk. But yeah, that is my understanding that there's going to be. I believe it's against the interest that you pay on your auto loan. So your auto interest is going to become deductible And I believe it's like David said, if you buy an American made car. So, I mean, I'm with auto loans at all time highs, paying, some people pay, 8, 10, 12, 20% on their auto loan interest. That's also a pretty substantial write off, right? So people who, who have those large auto loans and now have a big
Yeah.
percentage of money to potentially count against their taxes every year, that's not bad.
Yep.
One thing that I want to draw attention to, that it's important to try to understand, what are the actual core benefits that we get when there's a big overhaul like this. And I think it's very clear that we're trying to motivate people to work more and work better, right? Because ultimately tip income is a direct representation of how well you do your work, right?
Yeah, it's
You get
meritocracy.
higher tips if you're better. Like David, you used to work at a restaurant when you were younger, right? Like your tip income was, you could probably take your tip income and compare it to anybody else in the restaurant and see who the good waiters were,
Yeah.
right? Like they're the people getting the highest tips, right? Same thing with overtime. If we're incentivizing the harder work, now obviously you can't incentivize somebody to work 24 hours around the clock. It's within reason. But for the income that people were already, going and seeking after, like David was when he was a cop, I kind of like the idea of motivating that, right?
hmm
Motivating to do more work, to do better work. And it's funny. I think what this will have an impact for, you think between 3 and 10 years ago, when people would go get new jobs, like, in North California or whatever, a lot of times they'd be asking for like, oh, what's your stock bonuses? What's your RSUs? Like, what do I get for working here? I think a lot of that's going to change now to say, what's your overtime structure? Can I work unlimited overtime? And that's going to be like a perk of the job, just the same way that like health insurance and 401ks are. I think a lot of, hirees are going to come in saying, I want that overtime now. Right.
Yeah.
And employers are going to have to cater a little bit and potentially start offering overtime where they wouldn't otherwise, to motivate, a good applicants, right? And to get the top tier of the workforce. It's gonna have some interesting compounding effects all the way down the line.
So if you're a real estate investor, I would be prioritizing right now communities and areas where first responders, healthcare workers, or anyone who gets overtime lives and rents and buys. Same as if you're a real estate agent or you're a professional. And if you work in those professions, now is a time to consider taking advantage of that to buy a house where maybe you thought you weren't going to be able to buy previously. All right, moving on to some of the other parts in the big, beautiful bill, the biggest, most beautifulest bigly bill that we've ever seen in this country, that I am once again making great. No one could do it, Christian. They said that they could, they couldn't. Only I could do it, and I have done it. And this will go down in history as the biggest, beautifulest bill. Medicaid changes. I love how you're speechless with that. You're like, I don't even
Yeah,
know
I,
what
I
to say
just
to
think it's
this.
funny. It's kind of like a master chess move to call your bill the big beautiful bill, because then even the pundits of your bill, the people who don't like it, have to refer to it as, here's all the problems with the big beautiful bill. Like
Yes.
they have to
Yeah.
call your bill beautiful. It's kind of like saying, like, the most handsome man in the world. Well, I don't actually think he's the most but you're
That's what.
calling him the most handsome man in the world. It's hilarious to me that, even the people who criticize are going to have to call it the big beautiful bill.
Touche. That's a great point. Focal point of the package is nearly $800 billion in reduced spending in Medicaid. So that won't really have a ton to do. At least I can't make a connection right now with mortgages or the economy, but it's a pretty significant part. So that's worth mentioning if people are hearing about it for the first time listening to Mortgage Monday here. Part of the SNAP revamp, which is the Supplemental Nutrition and Assistance Program, my understanding of that, I'm not a politician, is that there were taxes that were collected to help make sure kids in school got healthier foods. They're going to be shifting a lot of that responsibility from the federal government to the states. So if you're in a state that doesn't have state income tax and they're taking on bigger burdens, you should pay attention to this kind of thing, because that may lead to your states increasing taxes on you and passing that on once the federal government says they don't want to pay for it. It could also lead to just maybe some of these programs being canceled when the state has to take them on. The SALT deductions, which are the state and local taxes, have been changed to where you used to be able to write off $10,000 of state and local taxes. Now, someone's going to hammer me in the comments. We didn't read the entire bill, folks. We have an overview of it, just like many of you. But my understanding of this is that you could write off up to $10,000 from what you're taxed federally if you paid that money to the state. So like in California, I think I was paying, what is it, Christian, 13.5% state income tax? Is
I
that
believe
right?
it's around there. Yeah.
13.8, something like that. We would have been able to write off up to $10,000 of money that we paid to the state, so we didn't have to double pay. That's being bumped up to $40,000. So people overall, especially if you live in a state with high state income taxes or state local taxes like New York, California, or an area where your municipalities hit you with special assessments, which a lot of the wealthier people live in
Yeah.
communities where they have to pay a lot of money in their property taxes to pay for some of the people in the community that don't make as much money. You're getting some relief on how much you're paying in taxes. And that's why I said earlier, if we can't stop expenses from rising, what we can do is put more money in the pockets of the people by reducing the taxes that they're spending to try to combat that. There is a Trump saving account for kids, which is also going to go by the acronym MAGA, which what did that stand for? I remember reading that somewhere. It doesn't say in this article, but it was like Doge, right? Where they made the acronym. The Department of Government Efficiency was a play on words for Elon's Doge thing. This is similar, where it's a savings account where parents or guardians who open Trump accounts for their children. Imagine calling it the Trump account. The federal government will contribute $1,000 for babies that are born between January 1st and December 31st. So if you have a baby between 2024 and 2028, the government will contribute $1,000 to an account for that baby. And there's another deduction in here, I believe, where you get $2,000 instead of $1,000 if you have a kid. So they're incentivizing people to have children because the birth rate has been declining pretty significantly. You have anything you want to add on that, Christian?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I do think it's unique that the benefit is only during Trump's presidency, right? 24 to 28. That I feel like that could be used in 2029 to say, if a Democrats elect us, he can't get your kids' money.
Right.
That's always interesting to see the political topic of it. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I do think we need to motivate, people having kids in the right circumstances. I don't think just, everybody should start having kids, but I do think really worldwide, not even just in America, there's a birth rate problem. It's getting harder and harder to afford kids, and a lot of of the younger generations are double thinking, starting families. And if this offers some relief there, I think ultimately that's a good thing. I don't really have any in terms of ways that it would impact mortgages,
Right.
but I'm pro birth rate increases, if that's anything. So
Yeah, that's good. There's a student loan overhaul in the big beautiful bill. A wholesale revamping of the current student loan program is key to legislation that provides $330 billion in budget cuts and savings. And it looks like they're trying to simplify the way that student loans are repaid. The proposal would replace all existing student loan repayment plans with two options. There's a standard option with monthly payments that are amortized over 10 to 25 years. And then there is a repayment assistance plan that's generally less generous than those that it would replace. Among other changes, the bill would repeal Biden-era regulations that made it easier for borrowers to get loans canceled if their colleges defrauded them or closed suddenly. And then this section, I think, is also pretty relevant to real estate investors in general. And so we've saved it for the end. So if you made it this far, thank you for being a loyal follower of the show and going all the way through. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought of today's show, and make sure you subscribe to the channel and share this with others. This is the Drill Baby Drill section. To generate revenue, a section of the bill will allow the increased leasing of public lands for drilling, mining, and logging, while also clearing the path for more development by speeding up government approvals, less regulation. Royalty rates paid by companies to extract oil, gas, and coal are going to be cut, which reverses Biden's attempts to curb fossil fuels to help address climate change. So Biden put some regulations in place where they increased how much people had to pay if you wanted to get oil, gas, or coal out of the earth here, which meant we imported it from other countries instead, which moved wealth out of America and into those countries. And as this is related to the tariffs that are going on, Trump is kind of changing the pathway to get these items so that we can get them out of our earth instead of other countries. And I would imagine if you live in an area with logging, mining, or drilling, you are going to see some pretty significant improvements in the demand for rental property and home prices. I remember when the fracking technology first kind of took off here, North Dakota exploded. That was a state that was the butt of everybody's jokes. There was a movie called Fargo that was the only reason we even knew that this state existed. And all of a sudden, real estate investors were making money hand over fist, throwing up like just crazy cheap structures that had bunk beds for all of these oil workers to go sleep in because they were working in these fracking farms. And it was exploding, and then all of a sudden just cut off right away because these regulations came in, shut down fracking, and then all those investors just got the music ended. They had nowhere to sit in the game of musical chairs, as does happen in our industry. This is likely going to reignite that. I found it interesting that it also talked about logging and mining, and I immediately thought about where would we be logging and where would we be mining, because I'd keep an eye out on those areas to grow, right? West Virginia comes to mind when you think about mining. I'm sure there's other people who locally understand, hey, we used to have a big mining operation here. Biden shut that down. If it opens up again, that may be some of the new hot markets that money moves to. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think in the same way that we mentioned, the tourist areas being benefited from the no tax on tips. Same thing, right? If there's a job surge, so to speak, where there's an influx of whether it's oil workers, mineral workers, logging workers. I think Pacific Northwest when I think of logging, right? All the trees that are available there, right? Now, obviously, we want to do it in a way that's responsible, but there's responsible ways to do that, right? And I think if it's done the right way, it will lead to an increase in jobs in that area. And if you combine that, you think about the people who benefit three different ways from this bill. People who benefit from overtime, who are, could be manual labor workers working in mines, oil fields, or logging farms, on top of the SALT savings. I mean, you're talking about compounding savings now, because not only are they not taxed on overtime, they can deduct their state income against their more of it against their federal tax, and there's more jobs in their field. Now you're like, oh, there's a certain subset of the population that's really benefiting here, right? And if for real estate investors to just keep that in mind here, we always talk about location, location, location. This is a very good opportunity to maybe get ahead of this a little bit and start targeting those markets with overtime workers, with tip workers, or with workers in the fields that David and I are speaking of now that should have a job surge coming, right?
Now, if people live in those areas, if they want to invest in those areas, if they've been following this and maybe this show affirmed, yeah, I am thinking the right way. I do want to get ahead of this. Where can they go to get pre-approved with you?
Yeah, first step, guys, is always a pre-approval. If you want to trust us with that, which we would love your business, theonebrokerage.com is the best way to find out more about our company. And if you want to email me directly, it's christian@theonebrokerage.com. And you can find me on social media at The One Broker. Instagram is the best way.
Do reach out to him. You can also reach out to me. You could go to davidgreen24.com. There's a chat option, goes right to my cell phone. So you guys can communicate with me directly if you have questions. If you want to be featured on Seeing Green or the David Green Show, you could go to davidgreen24.com/ask. We do need questions to be able to make that podcast, so please do that. You can also find me on Instagram. Give me a follow. I'm David Green 24. He's at _1_broker. And you guys can communicate with us there. Basically, if you're listening to the show, if you're getting information, if you're both scared and excited about the direction the country is taking, don't stay in a hole. Reach out, talk to us, get connected, tell us what you're looking to do. We will genuinely look for a way to help you accomplish your goals. And we'd love if you would help us accomplish ours. We are currently hiring more loan officers to work at the One Brokerage because we have too much opportunity, too many clients, and too many leads, and not enough people to work all of them. We also are, just like every company is, looking for good people. It's hard to find the good people that watch this show, and our best people are pretty freaking busy. So if you're a mortgage officer, if you're watching this, if you like this kind of content, do reach out. And if you're a real estate agent and you know a mortgage officer, please reach out to me or Christian and say, hey, I know this person. You should reach out to them and talk. We would like to hire people. Anything else we should mention before we let these good folks go, Christian?
No, I think this is a little bit of a longer episode than normal, guys, but you don't have every day where a big, beautiful bill is on the docket to talk about. So hopefully you guys learned a lot from this and have a different perspective potentially of what's coming.
That's it. Christian and I will be meeting very shortly here to do another meeting for people that are looking to join the One Brokerage. We try to do one of those a month. So if you're a mortgage broker and you're curious about what we have going on, that would be a good place to start. Just reach out and we'll get you a link and you can join the next one. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks everybody for being a hardworking American. And thanks everybody for loving your neighbor. We appreciate that. We are the One Brokerage. We want to help you finance and scale your real estate portfolio, as well as keep you abreast of what's going on so you can build your wealth. We will see you guys next week on Mortgage Monday.